The first sound on that frozen moon was the whisper of wind sliding across dead metal. Yet hidden deep inside the ruins of an abandoned mining outpost, a tiny alien girl breathed in slow, painful gasps, her small body curled behind a shattered fuel tank, her skin pale blue and trembling from hunger, her glowing eyes dim like fading stars. She had stopped counting the days since she last ate. She only remembered the screams of her people, the fire in the sky, and the cold hands that tore her away from her family. She tried not to cry anymore because crying wasted the little strength she had left. She pressed her thin fingers against her ribs and felt the sharp edges of bone. She wished she could sleep and never wake again, but fear kept her awake. Fear of the scavengers who had hunted her family, fear of the mercenaries who wanted her alive for reasons she didn't understand, fear of the universe that felt too big and too cruel for someone so small. Lights flickered through the cracks in the metal walls as an old transport ship landed nearby. The engines hummed low. Tired, like the ship itself was too old to keep flying, the girl's heart thumped. She pressed herself deeper into the shadows, her breath shaking as she watched a tall human figure step out, an old man with a thick gray beard, heavy boots and a long coat that flapped in the cold wind like worn wings. His name was Harlan Reed, though she did not know that yet. He had come only for scrap metal, a lonely old miner trying to survive another season on a dying moon. He carried a dim lantern in his hand, its warm glow dancing across the broken structures, melting a little of the icy darkness around him. He moved slowly, carefully, like someone who had lived through too many battles and no longer trusted silence. Harlan paused, listening to the wind, then to the small echoes inside the ruins. He thought he heard something, a faint tapping, so soft it could be a loose pipe shaking in the breeze. But he felt something in his chest, an instinct, a memory of the years he spent searching for life in dead places during the old wars. He raised the lantern and stepped further in, his boots crunching on the frozen floor. The girl watched him from her hiding spot, her body stiff with fear. She had seen humans before, soldiers in shining armor during the invasion. She had seen them fight and kill. She did not know that this one was different. She tried to stay silent, but her stomach made a weak sound, a small whimper of hunger she could not control. Harlan stopped instantly, turning toward the noise, lifting the lantern higher. "Hello," he said softly, not like a soldier, not like a hunter, but like a man who had once spoken to children. His voice was rough yet warm, carrying a careful kindness that the girl had never heard from strangers. He stepped closer, and the lantern's light touched her hiding place, revealing the faint glow of her eyes. The girl panicked. She tried to crawl backward, scraping her knees on metal, her breath turning into white clouds from fear. Harlan froze when he saw her, not because she was alien, not because her skin glowed faint blue, but because she looked like death had already touched her and was waiting to take her the next moment. "Oh, kid," he whispered under his breath, feeling his heart crack open. "What happened to you?" He slowly crouched, lowering himself so he wouldn't look big or threatening. He placed the lantern on the ground and opened his coat to show he carried no weapon in his hands. The girl stared at him, uncertain, ready to run or fight or cry. She didn't know what to do anymore. Her whole world had been fear for so long. Harlan reached gently into his pocket and pulled out a small food bar. He slid it across the floor toward her. The girl glanced at it, then at him. Then she shook her head with weak stubbornness. She had seen hunters do the same before grabbing children. She didn't trust him. She couldn't trust anyone. But her starving body betrayed her. A low, desperate sound escaped her throat. Harlan noticed the trembling in her arms, the way her fingers curled like she was too weak to stretch them. He knew she wouldn't last another night in the ruins. He took a slow breath and removed his thick jacket despite the biting cold. He placed it carefully on the floor and nudged it toward her. "You're freezing," he murmured. "Let me help you." The girl hesitated. Then a shiver ran through her entire body. She reached out with trembling hands and touched the edge of the jacket. Its warmth startled her. She pulled it closer, wrapping it around herself like a fragile shell of safety she had never known. Harlan's eyes softened when he saw her trust him even a little. He moved closer inch by inch, making sure she could see his hands at all times. Then he gently lifted her. feeling how light she was, as if she were made of nothing but fear and bones. She didn't fight. She was too weak. Her head rested on his chest, and for the first time in many days she felt warmth. As Harlan carried her out of the ruins, snow began to fall around them, soft, slow, silent. Like the world itself was watching this fragile moment. The girl looked at the stars above, wondering if her family could see her. Wondering if this human was taking her to life or to death, she didn't know. Yet something deep inside her whispered that this man was different, that this moment was different. And as the wind wrapped around them, Harlan held her tighter, unaware that this small, dying alien child he rescued tonight would change not only his life but the fate of worlds far beyond his imagination. Snow crunched beneath Harlan's boots as he carried the fragile girl toward his cabin, the wind brushing against them like a living thing, cold and sharp. Yet Harlan moved with steady steps, holding her as if she were something precious and breakable, her small frame shaking inside his heavy jacket, her faint glowing eyes half open as she drifted between fear and exhaustion. His cabin waited on a lonely ridge, a small wooden shelter with old solar panels and a chimney that barely worked, the kind of place built for a man who had long stopped expecting company. Smoke rose from the chimney in a thin gray curl, the only sign of warmth on that frozen moon. Harlan pushed the door open with his shoulder, letting the heat spill out into the night. Inside, the cabin smelled of old wood, tea leaves, and worn memories. Harlan gently laid the girl on a soft blanket near the fire. The warmth touched her skin slowly, almost tenderly, and she shivered again. Not from fear this time, but from the sudden change in temperature. She looked around with wide eyes, unsure if this place was safety or another trap. Harlan knelt beside her, his hands rough yet gentle as he pulled the blanket around her thin shoulders. He spoke softly, his voice low and warm. "You're safe here, kid. No one's gonna hurt you." Even though she didn't understand every word, she felt something in his tone, something she had almost forgotten existed. Kindness. He heated a small pot of broth, and when the smell reached her, her stomach twisted with hunger that felt like pain. Harlan saw the way she looked at the pot, the way her fingers curled against the blanket like she was afraid to ask. He poured the warm broth into a metal cup and set it beside her. She hesitated, then slowly lifted it with trembling hands, sipping carefully, her eyes closing as warmth spread through her empty body. While she drank, Harlan sat on the other side of the fire, watching her without staring too hard, giving her space, giving her quiet. He felt something heavy in his chest, like a memory he had tried to bury for years, the memory of a long-lost family, a silence that had lived with him since the war. And now, looking at this lonely girl, he felt that silence shift. Outside, the wind howled softly against the wooden walls as if carrying whispers from distant parts of the galaxy. The girl flinched every time it grew louder, her body reacting before her mind could, Harlan noticed. He spoke gently again. Just the wind, nothing more. But she didn't trust sounds anymore. She had learned to fear everything. Hours passed, the fire crackled, and the girl finally relaxed enough to lie down, her eyes drifting between the flames and Harlan's calm figure. She didn't know his name, didn't know why he helped her, but she knew he hadn't hurt her. That alone was enough to keep her awake with wonder. He checked her temperature, wiped a cut on her cheek, and made sure she drank enough broth, each gesture slow and careful, as if he feared she might break. When she grew too tired to keep her eyes open, she whispered a sound in her own alien tongue, something soft, like a fading lullaby. Harlan couldn't understand it, but he knew it was something important, a name, maybe a memory, maybe a prayer. Then she drifted into sleep, her fingers clutching the edge of his jacket for comfort. Harlan stood quietly, staring at the child who now slept in his cabin like a wounded star fallen into his arms. He moved to the window and stared out into the dark mountains. Something deep inside him told him her arrival was no accident, that fate had brought her to him for a reason he could not yet see. The night was calm for a few hours, but silence on that moon never lasted long. A faint electronic beep echoed from the console on his wall, A signal detector blinking with an alert he hadn't seen in years. A strange energy reading pulsed across the screen. Unlike anything the old miner's moon normally produced, the girl's presence had stirred something in the air. Harlan frowned. Adjusting the controls, the readings grew stronger, pointing toward the ruins where he had found her. He felt his stomach tighten. It meant someone else was looking. Someone else had noticed the same strange energy that had led him there. He didn't know who, but something cold settled in his bones. He glanced at the girl, sleeping peacefully near the fire, unaware of the danger creeping closer with every passing minute. Harlan lowered the lights, covered the windows, and checked his old emergency rifle, a relic from a war he prayed he'd never see again. He whispered to himself, "Whatever happened to you out there, kid? It's not finished." The detector beeped again, louder this time, as if warning him, as if counting down. Harlan looked through the cracks in the wooden boards and saw flashes in the sky far above the mountains. Tiny lights moving slowly, like ships entering the atmosphere. Fear tightened in his chest, not for himself, but for the small child now depending on him. He whispered toward the girl, though she slept deeply, "Don't worry. I've got you," but in the distance, something else whispered back. The hum of engines in the night, growing closer, searching, hunting. The moon had long been forgotten by most of the galaxy, yet now it felt like the center of a storm moving directly toward his cabin, toward the girl he had promised to protect, and as the fire softened to a low glow, the shadows on the walls stretched long and uneasy, carrying the quiet truth that their peaceful night was ending, and the real danger was only beginning. The morning arrived slowly on the frozen moon, a pale blue light pushing through the clouds as if the sun itself hesitated to touch such a lonely place. Inside the wooden cabin, the fire burned low, giving off a soft orange glow that painted the walls with warmth. The little alien girl lay wrapped in blankets, breathing quietly, her small chest rising and falling with a rhythm that almost soothed the room. Harlan watched her from a worn chair, his elbows resting on his knees, his eyes heavy with worry. He had barely slept, not because of her, but because of the blinking signal on his console and the lights he had seen moving through the sky. He knew the universe did not send visitors to forgotten moons without a reason, especially not after he had discovered a starving alien child with glowing veins and a past tangled in danger. As the girl stirred, Harlan leaned forward, her eyes fluttering open like fragile wings. She looked at him with a mixture of confusion and fear. Then something new stirred in her gaze, a trust she did not fully understand yet. Harlan offered a small smile, rough but gentle. "Morning, kid," he whispered, and she blinked slowly, her delicate fingers tightening around the edge of the blanket as if his voice alone kept her safe. He warmed more broth, handing it to her carefully. She sipped it slowly, her glowing eyes softening as warmth filled her stomach. When she finished, she looked at him, hesitated, then lifted her hand toward his face, tracing the air inches away as if trying to understand him through some silent sense only she possessed. Harlan stayed still, letting her study him. Then she spoke a single word in a trembling voice, her accent unfamiliar yet innocent. "Father." The sound hit Harlan with the force of memory and grief. He froze, breath-catching as the word settled in the space between them like something sacred and broken. He didn't correct her. He didn't push her away. He simply placed a hand on her small shoulder and breathed deeply, letting her know she wasn't alone before he could speak again. The cabin trembled faintly. Just a vibration at first, soft enough to mistake for distant thunder. But Harlan's face hardened instantly. The vibration grew, shaking dust from the rafters. Rattling cups on the shelf, the girl tensed, her eyes widening with fear she had carried since the day she lost her family. Harlan hurried to the window, lifting the edge of the curtain outside. The sky rippled with silver trails, unfamiliar ships gliding through the atmosphere like quiet predators, their engines low and eerie, the kind that announced danger without sound, the kind that didn't belong to ordinary miners or travelers. The girl crawled off the blanket, struggling to stand, her hands shaking as she reached for Harlan's coat, her eyes glowing brighter, trembling with recognition and terror. He knelt beside her, steadying her small frame. "Do you know them?" he asked softly, and she nodded weakly, pressing her forehead to his chest as if hoping to disappear in his arms. Harlan felt anger build inside him, not the wild anger of youth, but the heavy, controlled anger of someone who had lost too much already. He lifted her into his arms again, understanding that whatever hunted her had now found their trail. He would not let them take her. He would not let her return to pain or captivity. He moved quickly around the cabin, shutting off lights, grabbing supplies, gathering the old gear he hoped he would never need again. He placed the girl near the fireplace while he loaded his rifle, her small voice whispering broken words in her language, warnings. Memories, please. He could not understand her speech, but he understood her fear completely. The ground outside shook harder as the ships landed somewhere beyond the ridge, metallic legs crushing ice and rock. Harlan peeked through another window and saw dark silhouettes moving across the snow. Tall armored figures with glowing visors. Alien mercenaries searching the terrain with cold precision, their weapons humming with deadly heat. The girl reached for him again, her hands glowing faintly as if reacting to the presence of the hunters. Her breathing quickened and she pressed her palms against her temples. Overwhelmed by a flood of fear and memories, Harlan rushed back to her, holding her gently as her body trembled like a fragile bird caught in a storm. "It's all right, kid, I'm here," he whispered. But he knew his words were not enough. Suddenly her powers activated in a flicker of panic, a small pulse of shimmering energy bursting from her skin, lighting the room with a soft wave of blue light. Harlan instinctively shielded her, but the pulse faded quickly, leaving her weak and breathless. She looked terrified of herself, terrified of what she might do, terrified that she might hurt him too. He cupped her cheeks, forcing her to look at him, his rough voice steady like a promise. "You didn't hurt me, you didn't do anything wrong. You're safe with me." Outside, the mercenaries paused, turning their helmets toward the direction of the energy pulse. They began moving faster, closing in with silent but coordinated steps. Harlan felt the window panes vibrate with each measured footstep, each echo of fate drawing nearer. He grabbed a hidden door panel and opened a narrow tunnel beneath the floorboards, an old escape route from a time when this moon had seen war. He lifted the girl and held her close, her small arms wrapping around his neck, her heartbeat fast and fragile against his chest. "Hold on to me," he whispered, stepping into the darkness of the tunnel, lowering the panel back into place above them, plunging them into shadows lit only by the faint glow of her trembling skin. As he moved deeper, the cabin above them shook with heavy boots, voices speaking in harsh alien tones, weapons scanning, searching for them, hunting them. The girl pressed her face into his shoulder, her energy flickering like a candle struggling against a storm. Harlan felt the cold tunnel air sting his throat, but he held her tighter, his voice low and fierce as he whispered into her hair. "They're not taking you, not today, not ever." And in the frozen dark beneath the earth with enemies closing in above them, the bond between a lonely old human and a terrified alien child grew stronger, wrapped together in fear, hope, and a destiny waiting just beyond the shadows. The tunnel stretched beneath the frozen ground like a vein carved through darkness. Narrow and cold, the air stiff with dust and memories, Harlan moved through it with the alien girl clinging to his chest, her tiny fingers tightening around his coat whenever the earth trembled from footsteps above. Each vibration felt like a countdown, a warning that time was running out. He kept one arm wrapped around her and the other pressed against the tunnel wall, guiding himself through the curves carved long ago during the old war. The dim glow of her skin lit the narrow space with a soft blue shimmer, enough to show the jagged rocks and rusted pipes around them, but not enough to reveal how far danger truly was. Above them, the cabin creaked, then shattered as mercenaries tore through it, their heavy boots stomping on broken wood, their weapons humming with heat, metallic voices echoing in their alien tongue, searching for a child they refused to let escape. The girl buried her face against Harlan's shoulder when she heard the first explosion. A short burst of fire meant to scare anything hiding. She trembled violently, her breathing fast and shallow, her energy flickering around her skin like frightened starlight. Harlan tightened his grip, whispering gently, "It's all right, I've got you, stay with me." But he knew it wasn't all right. He knew they were trapped unless he found a way to turn the chaos above into an advantage. The tunnel opened into an old service room, its walls lined with inactive machinery coated in frost. Harlan set the girl down for a moment, her legs wobbling as she stood, glowing eyes darting around in fear. He knelt to her level, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Listen, kid, we're gonna get out of here. But you have to trust me." She nodded weakly. Though tears threatened to fall, she reached for him again, her voice trembling with a single broken word. "Father." And that one word filled Harlan's chest with a fierce fire he hadn't felt in years, the kind that made a man fight even when he knew the odds were hopeless. He turned toward the old control panel in the corner of the room, smashing the icy frost off it with the butt of his rifle. Wires sparked weakly, metal plates shifting as life returned to machines that had slept for decades. Through the cracks in the ceiling, he heard harsh alien orders, Soldiers spreading out, weapons ready, scanners searching for the smallest trace of her energy. Harlan switched on a sequence, causing faint rumbling in the walls. He remembered this base from his soldier days. Remembered what it could do. Remembered that parts of it were dangerous enough to scare even humans. He whispered to himself, "Come on, old girl. Wake up." And for a moment it felt like the forgotten machines listened, ancient gears turning with a rusty groan. He scooped the girl into his arms again, moving deeper through another tunnel as lights flickered above them. The mercenaries had found the hidden panel and were breaking through, their torches burning red circles into the wooden floor. Harlan moved faster, boots splashing in shallow puddles, each step an echo of the looming chase. Suddenly the ground above shook violently, dust raining down like snow. A heavy clang signaled the mercenaries dropping into the first tunnel segment. The girl heard them and whimpered softly. Harlan whispered, "Don't look back. Just hold on." Then he activated a manual lever on the wall, releasing a cascade of debris behind them, sealing the first part of the tunnel, buying seconds, not safety. They reached the end of the tunnel, entering a massive underground chamber that stretched like a hidden dome beneath the mountain. Broken lights flickered across old human technology, metal crates stacked in forgotten corners, weapons locked in dusty glass cases, and walls covered in symbols from a war long erased. The girl looked around with wide eyes, whispering something in her own language, her fingers glowing as the symbols reacted faintly to her presence. Harlan noticed the reaction too, fear mixing with awe. "What in the world are you?" he murmured, not in anger or suspicion, but in wonder. The girl placed her small, glowing hand on one of the symbols, and for a moment the underground base thrummed with energy, old circuits humming as if recognizing her, as if she belonged to a part of history no one had told him. But the moment shattered as the chamber door behind them blew open. Mercenaries pouring in, their rifles raised, their glowing visors reflecting the chamber lights. Harlan dragged the girl behind a stack of crates, bullets slicing through metal and stone, sparks flying, echoes bouncing off the dome like thunder trapped underground. Harlan fired back, his old soldier instincts snapping into place. Every shot sharp, every movement controlled, but he knew his rifle was old and his ammo limited. He could not win a full fight, not against trained mercenaries with advanced tech. The girl pressed against him, her fingers gripping his coat, her breath shaking, her energy flickering brighter every time she heard a blast. One mercenary moved too close, stepping around the crate, aiming directly at them. Harlan pushed the girl behind him, raising his rifle too slow. Knowing he was 1 second away from death, the mercenary fired, a shot of pure heat flying toward them like a burning comet, but the shot never reached them. The air rippled, bending like liquid light. The girl screamed, a sound of pure fear mixed with instinct, and a wave of blue energy burst from her body, slamming into the mercenary with the force of a storm, throwing him across the chamber and knocking 2 more off their feet. The chamber fell silent for 1 breathless heartbeat. Harlan stared at her, shocked, not afraid of her power, but afraid of how much she must have suffered to carry something so strong and so broken inside her. She stumbled, dizzy, her glowing eyes fading again, the energy draining her strength like a tide pulling away from shore. Harlan caught her before she fell, holding her close as more mercenaries regrouped at the entrance. He whispered into her hair, voice rough with fear and love. "You saved me, kid. But we can't stay here." And with enemy forces closing in from all sides, with an alien child trembling in his arms and a galaxy of secrets burning inside her, Harlan turned toward the far exit of the chamber, stepping into a deeper darkness, knowing that this battle for family had only just begun. The deeper Harlan moved into the underground base, the colder the air became, a quiet cold that felt ancient and waiting, as if the walls themselves remembered the battles fought long before the moon was forgotten. He held the girl close, her forehead resting weakly against his shoulder, her breathing soft and uneven after the burst of power that saved his life, her small body trembling with exhaustion. He reached a heavy steel door at the far end of the chamber, its surface covered in dust and symbols only half visible beneath time. He pushed it open with effort, the hinges groaning like a creature waking from centuries of sleep. The room inside glowed faintly with lines of blue lights running along the floor and ceiling, lights that flickered faster when the girl entered. As if sensing her presence, Harlan set her gently on a crate. Wiping sweat and dust from her forehead, she blinked up at him with tired, glowing eyes, whispering a soft word in her alien tongue, her voice barely stronger than a breath. He didn't understand it, but the way her fingers curled around his hand told him it meant fear mixed with trust. A plea not to leave her alone, "I'm right here, kid," he murmured, his voice low and firm, carrying the warmth of a promise he never thought he would make again. "I'm not letting them get you." He searched the room quickly, finding old consoles covered in frost, sealed weapon cases, scattered data chips, and a forgotten control station that hummed with faint power. When he wiped the dust away, screens flickered to life, showing symbols of the human defense network from decades ago. Long before he retired, long before the world forgot this base existed, Harlan pressed a few buttons, and the system recognized his ancient soldier ID embedded in an old dog tag he kept around his neck. A quiet beep confirmed access. The screens brightened, revealing maps of the moon, energy readings, and access to emergency protocols no one had touched in years. He glanced back at the girl who sat quietly, her hands glowing faintly as she studied the room, her gaze locked on a wall panel engraved with the same symbols that had reacted to her earlier. She reached toward it, her fingers trembling, before Harlan gently stopped her, worried she might trigger something she couldn't control. "We need help," he whispered to himself, his jaw tightening with the weight of the truth he didn't want to admit. He could fight, he could run, he could hide, but none of that would stop entire squads of mercenaries from hunting them across the moon. He needed someone who could reach them before the girl's powers burned out, or the mercenaries overwhelmed them. With a deep breath, he activated the base's long-range communication array. The screen buzzed, sending a faint signal into space, a distress code used only by old war veterans, a code that hadn't been transmitted in years. He didn't know if anyone was still listening, but he sent it anyway, for the girl, for himself, for the fragile hope that someone somewhere would answer. The girl touched his arm, her eyes lifting toward the screen with curiosity, then sadness, then fear. She spoke in her trembling alien whisper, pointing at her chest, then pressing her small glowing hand to the console as if telling him she understood the signal was for her, that help might come, but danger would come faster. The ground trembled again, a heavy roar echoing through the base as mercenaries broke through another barrier, their weapons buzzing like angry beasts hungry for blood. Harlan grabbed his rifle and checked the last of his ammo, his hands steady despite the pressure closing in like a tightening fist around them. He moved toward a sealed storage container, prying it open with a metal bar. Inside lay old human armor, dusty and heavy but still functional, pieces marked with scratches from battles long forgotten. He had never imagined wearing armor again, but the moment he touched it, something familiar awakened inside him, the soldier he buried years ago rising through his bones. He didn't put it on for himself, he put it on because the girl's life depended on it, because someone had to stand between her and the monsters who wanted to use her as a weapon. He strapped on the armor piece by piece, the joints clicking, the plates locking into place, the old power cells humming back to life. He felt heavier, stronger, not young again but ready. The girl watched him, her glowing eyes soft and full of something he hadn't felt in years, belief. She reached out and touched the armor on his chest, her small hand leaving a faint blue shimmer on the metal as if marking him, claiming him, trusting him in a way that pierced his heart deeper than any blade could. Suddenly, the base lights flickered and a loud alarm echoed through the chamber. The mercenaries had breached another wall, their footsteps growing louder, organized, relentless, a storm of death sweeping toward them. Harlan lifted the girl into his arms again, holding her tight as she leaned her head against his shoulder. Too weak to walk now, too drained from the surge of her own power, he moved toward the backup exit, the echo of boots behind them growing sharper, closer, vicious. Each step a reminder that time was bleeding away. He slammed his hand against the emergency door panel, and it groaned open to reveal a dark passage leading deeper into the mountain. As they slipped inside, Harlan heard a sudden boom behind them. Mercenaries bursting into the chamber they had just escaped, their voices sharp, furious, determined to hunt them down to the very last corner of the moon. He held the girl tighter, whispering to her like a promise carved into stone. "We're not stopping, kid, you hear me? We're not stopping." And as the steel door closed behind them with a thunderous clang sealing off the lights and noise, the two of them disappeared into the depths of the forgotten base, carrying with them a growing destiny, a secret power, and the unbreakable bond of a father and daughter running from the shadows that wanted to swallow them whole. The passage grew narrower the deeper Harlan carried the girl, the walls tightening like the throat of some ancient beast swallowing them whole. His armor scraped against metal as he pushed forward, each step heavy, each breath loud inside the helmet he had not worn in decades. The girl clung weakly to his chest, her glowing eyes dimming as exhaustion pulled her toward sleep she could no longer resist. The air shifted, colder at first, then strangely warm as the passage opened into another hidden chamber, this one larger than the last, illuminated by a soft circle of lights on the floor that activated as soon as the girl crossed the threshold. Ancient scanners hummed to life, reading her presence, recognizing something in her blood that no human had ever encoded. Harlan stopped, stunned by the way the room seemed to awaken for her alone. Symbols carved into the walls glowed faint gold, forming patterns that rippled like waves. The girl lifted her head slightly, her gaze drifting across the symbols as if she knew them, as if some forgotten memory stirred inside her bones. She stretched her trembling hand toward one of the glowing lines, and Harlan gently pulled her hand back, whispering her name the only way he knew how. Soft and careful, "Lyra, don't push yourself," he murmured, and she leaned her head against him again, trusting the sound of his voice more than the pull of ancient power in the walls. But the room kept changing, the lights rising from the floor to form a faint holographic projection in front of them, shapes of her species, tall, graceful beings with the same glowing lines spiraling down their arms. The images showed destruction, fire tearing through cities, mercenaries swarming like locusts, a royal symbol shattering in flames. Lyra whimpered softly as if she remembered every piece of it. Every scream, every tear. Harlan swallowed hard, understanding more than the images explained. The girl wasn't just a survivor. She was the last of something sacred, something the galaxy feared or desired or hated enough to hunt down to the final child. Before he could look deeper into the hologram, the ground trembled violently, dust pouring from the ceiling like sand from a broken hourglass. Weapons clashed somewhere in the tunnels behind them, shouts echoing with cruel intention. The mercenaries were close again, faster than he expected, angrier than before, hunting with precision now that they had confirmed her location. Harlan tightened his grip on Lyra, who stirred at the noise, her breathing sharp, her power flickering in fear. "Easy, kid, I'm with you," he whispered, even though he felt fear coiled tight in his own chest like a fist. He examined the chamber quickly and found another exit, a narrow door leading deeper beneath the mountain, but when he approached it, the symbols on the floor lit up brighter, a pulse of energy shooting toward the door, locking it in place as if waiting for something, waiting for her. Lyra lifted her glowing hand toward the symbols again, her fingers trembling but determined. "No, wait," Harlan whispered, but she touched the central symbol with the tip of her finger. A soft chime echoed through the room, warm light spreading outward like ripples across water. The door clicked open, metal sliding away like petals unfolding. Lyra sagged afterward, the contact draining what little strength she had left. Harlan caught her before she fell, whispering gently into her hair, "You're all right. I've got you." He carried her into the next passage just as the chamber door behind them buckled from a heavy explosion. Mercenaries shouting, weapons firing wildly as they poured into the chamber they had just escaped. Harlan didn't look back. He ran, the tunnel ahead sloping downward into a massive hangar filled with machines older than both of them combined, ships buried in dust, engines frozen in silence. Yet the energy in the room grew stronger at Lyra's presence. Humming awake, responding to her bloodline, one ship in particular flickered with faint blue light, lines of energy crawling across its hull like veins remembering how to pulse again. Lyra whimpered weakly, staring at the ship with a mixture of fear and destiny, as if she had seen it before in dreams she never wanted to remember. Harlan approached it, knowing it was their only chance. He laid her gently in the co-pilot seat, her head resting against the cushion, her tiny hands trembling as she reached for the glowing controls. Her touch brought the entire ship roaring to life, engines humming, lights exploding across the dashboard like a heartbeat returning from silence. Harlan dropped into the pilot's seat, strapping himself in as alarms flashed throughout the hangar. The mercenaries burst into the upper walkway just as the hangar shield cracked open. Cold air sweeping through like a storm, they fired down at the ship, shots sparking against the hull, metal sizzling from impact. Harlan gritted his teeth, gripping the controls tightly. "Hold on, Lyra," he whispered, shaking from adrenaline, fear, and fierce love. "We're getting out of here." The ship lifted, shaky at first, then steady as Lyra's faint energy threaded itself through the engine's core. The mercenaries shouted orders above them, firing continuously, trying to cripple the ship before it could escape. Harlan pushed the thrusters with every bit of strength left in his old hands. The ship roared upward, smashing through the last layer of rock and ice, exploding into the sky in a storm of light and fire. Lyra opened her eyes weakly, seeing the stars above, her voice barely a whisper against the hum of the engines. "Father," she breathed, her small glowing hand reaching for his, and he took it instantly, holding it tightly, grounding her through the storm. Behind them, the moon burned with chaos, mercenary ships rising in pursuit, their engines hungry for capture, their weapons hot with hatred. The chase that would shake the galaxy had just begun. The stars stretched across the black sky like silent witnesses as Harlan's ship tore through the atmosphere, the engines shaking with strain, the metal groaning under the pressure of escape. Lyra lay strapped beside him, her small hand wrapped weakly around his armored fingers, her glowing eyes flickering like fading lanterns. She watched him with a fragile trust that felt heavier than any burden he had ever carried. Behind them, mercenary ships broke through the clouds in violent bursts, their engines screaming, their lights cutting through the darkness like hungry predators, each one locked onto their ship with ruthless intent, their weapons charging ready to strike. Harlan glanced at Lyra, saw the fear trembling across her face, and tightened his grip on her hand, as if grounding her soul to his own. "You stay with me, kid," he whispered, his voice rough but steady, carrying a strength he didn't feel but refused to abandon. "I'm not losing you." Lyra closed her eyes, drawing in a shivering breath as her power flickered beneath her skin, threads of blue light pulsing along her veins. She reached out and touched the ship's console again, her fingers trembling, the lights responding instantly, glowing brighter, warmer, as if they recognized her touch more clearly each time. Energy surged through the engines, pushing the ship faster, slicing through the night sky like a falling star racing upward instead of down. The mercenaries fired, beams of heat slicing past them, explosions bursting behind their wings, shaking the ship so violently Lyra cried out. Harlan steadied the controls with both hands, his teeth clenched, every muscle straining to keep them alive. Sparks burst from one of the panels, smoke filling the cockpit for a moment before the air filters cleared it away. The galaxy opened above them, a dark ocean of endless distance, but freedom was far away and death was close behind. Lyra's eyes fluttered, her strength fading again, her body too tired to hold the power rising inside her. She whispered in her fragile voice, "Father, they're coming." And Harlan felt something break inside him. "A deep ache stronger than fear, I know, kid," he murmured, brushing a strand of hair away from her face with trembling fingers. "But I'm right here. Nothing's taking you from me." Another blast hit the rear of the ship, alarms screaming like wounded animals. The engines sputtered, the ship shaking uncontrollably. Harlan fought the controls with a desperate energy he thought he had lost years ago. He saw the mercenaries closing in on both sides, forming a deadly circle ready to trap them like prey. Lyra's breathing grew fast and shallow, her small body trembling as her power overflowed without direction. She clutched her chest, waves of blue light leaking from her fingertips, every pulse reacting violently with the ship's engine core. Harlan grabbed her shoulders, trying to steady her, but her energy surged again, a force she couldn't control, a force she feared more than the enemies chasing them. "Don't fight it," he whispered, his voice cracking with emotion. "I'm right here, you're not alone. Breathe with me." Her glowing eyes met his, wide and full of fear, but the sound of his voice calmed her, trembling. She pressed her forehead weakly against his arm, the bond between them holding her where strength could not. The energy inside her steadied, humming like a heartbeat finding its rhythm again. Suddenly, a distant beacon flickered on the ship's scanner, a signal Harlan recognized instantly, a symbol of Earth's defense fleet burning bright on the screen, ships emerging from the far horizon, cutting through the void like silver arrows drawn from the quiver of salvation, their engines blazing, their formation tight and ready for war. The mercenaries hesitated for a moment, their ships faltering at the sight of the incoming fleet. Harlan felt hope surge through him like a breath he had been holding for years. He squeezed Lyra's hand gently, whispering, "Help's coming, kid. Just hold on." But the mercenaries were relentless, firing relentlessly with desperation, forcing Harlan's ship into a spiral, metal screeching, alarms crying out. Lyra's eyes widened in fear as she clung to him, the world tilting, the stars spinning, the universe swirling around them like a storm. At the last moment, Earth battleships roared past them, intercepting enemy fire with powerful shields, returning shots with precise fury. The mercenary ships scattered, some exploding into bursts of white fire, others retreating into the darkness of space. The remaining few turned back toward Harlan's ship in one final attempt to take Lyra, but they never got close enough. A massive human cruiser shifted into position, blasting them into silence with a single devastating shot. The dark sky flashed bright, then quieted, leaving only the hum of Harlan's struggling ship drifting through the aftermath. The human fleet surrounded them, stabilizing the ship with tractor beams, pulling them gently into the docking bay of the nearest cruiser. Harlan collapsed back in his seat. Exhausted, trembling with relief, Lyra lay against his chest, her small hands holding tightly onto his armor, her glowing eyes half open as she whispered in a fading voice, "Father, safe." He held her close, pressing his forehead to hers, feeling tears he had not shed in years burn behind his eyes. "Yeah, kid. Safe." Medical officers burst in as soon as the hatch opened, voices echoing, lights bright, hands reaching. But Lyra didn't let go of him, her fingers clutching his coat as if he were the only solid thing in a universe made of shadows. Harlan lifted her gently, carrying her in his arms through the corridor, ignoring the questions, ignoring the chaos, walking with a determination carved into his bones. He didn't know what Earth would decide, didn't know what the galaxy would demand, but he knew one thing with unshakable certainty. He would not let anyone take her away. Not after everything, not after she fought to live, not after she whispered the word father with a love that rebuilt him from the inside out. As he carried her into the medical bay, her glowing hand resting over his heart, he whispered a quiet promise into her hair, a promise shaped like destiny. "I'm with you, Lyra. Wherever the stars take us, I'm with you." And in that moment, as the door closed behind them and the ship drifted through the quiet dark, their bond became something unbreakable, something the galaxy would one day remember. The story of an abandoned alien girl and the human who became her father. A story that had only just begun,